Hello everyone and welcome. Thank you for joining the channel, but in this video we're going to be taking a look at whether any of the currently available grenade launchers that won't be getting sunset at the end of Season 11 are a viable replacement for Wendigo when paired with Izanagi's Burden. Of course, we don't know everything that Bungie will be giving us in Beyond Light, so things could change dramatically once the next DLC is released, including the possibility of sandbox changes. Now, as far as I'm aware, there are only 4 grenade launchers that won't be sunset at the end of this season, and all have been tested, those being Interference 6, Berenger's Memory, Swarm of the Raven and Outrageous Fortune. The structure of the video will just discuss the method for each grenade launcher with demonstrations, and then we'll jump straight into the graph. I won't be spending any time talking about damage per round for each weapon, etc. The only perk required for this is obviously auto-load and holster, although they've all been tested with spike grenades. DPS is measured up to and including the 5th and final honed edge ×4 round that you can fire from Izanagi's Burden. Now, Wendigo is a 120 RPM grenade launcher, as is Interference 6, so the method tested for that is identical to when using Wendigo. The only thing with that is, you need to use a backup mag mod to increase magazine size from 5 to 7, so no boss or major spec mod. Augmented Drum might increase the magazine size to a minimum of 6, but that's in the same slot as spike grenades, which of course is extremely important for damage. So for anyone unaware of Izanagi's Burden and Wendigo's sprint cancel method, a short demonstration is coming onto the screen now, remembering Interference 6 will be the same as this. With the other 3 grenade launchers, however, they are all 150 RPM, and if you fire 3 rounds and switch back to Izanagi's, there'll be a considerable pause where you can't fire, which is due to the reload timeout, even though the weapon appears to be fully reloaded. And this is of course because they fire 3 rounds faster than Wendigo or Interference 6, so I've tested 2 methods for the 150 RPM grenade launchers. The first is using a boss or major spec mod, so only 5 in the magazine, and firing 4 grenades in between every round fired from Izanagi's Burden. The problem with this method is when reloading Izanagi's, you need to rely on the grenade launcher's auto-load and holster perk every time, which in turn means staying within the Izanagi's reload animation for longer, before switching back to the grenade launcher. A demonstration of this is coming onto the screen now using Outrageous Fortune. The second method is when using a backup mag mod, increasing the magazine size to 7, firing 4 grenades at first and then the remaining 3 on the second round of grenade launcher damage. After the 3 and then firing a round from Izanagi's, you'll need to stay in the reload animation for a little longer to proc auto load and holster on the grenade launcher, the same as when using Wendigo. The downside to this is that you no longer have a boss or major spec mod, so damage is less, but on the upside, by using a backup mag mod, you don't need to rely on auto-load and holster every time you reload Izanagi's, but rather 1 in 2, again, the same as Wendigo. After firing 4 rounds from a 150 RPM grenade launcher, there is no delay before you can fire from Izanagi's. And of course, after firing 3 rounds, yes, there is a delay, but that delay is also contributing to auto-load and holster's proc time, and therefore you don't need to stay in the Izanagi's reload animation for as long. Ultimately, that won't matter too much as you're just taking a little time from the reload animation and adding it to the fire delay, but it means that you're not losing out on any DPS as a result of that delay. Not sure if any of that made sense, but here's a demonstration of the backup mag mod 4 and 3 method on Outrageous Fortune again. Now, before we go any further, I want to show the difference between these 2 methods on the graph. Just to confirm, the grenade launcher is Outrageous Fortune with spike grenades and auto load and holster, with the comparison being between a backup mag mod and a boss or major spec mod. So, with a boss or major spec mod, you can see that it pulls ahead a little at the start, but falls behind once reloading Izanagi's, due to needing to proc, auto load and holster. After the next round of damage from the grenade launcher in Izanagi's, it's ahead again, but then falls behind at the reload. It's a game of leapfrog, with the boss or major spec method yielding the most damage, but the backup mag mod method having the higher DPS. And after trying these methods with the different grenade launchers, all of the 150s take the same amount of time to switch and reload, so they're all pretty much identical, with the only difference being damage per round. But even then, it's extremely small. So with the backup mag mod method having the higher DPS, I tested the other 3 grenade launchers using that method as well. Now, let's start looking at numbers. So Outrageous Fortune, using the 4 rounds fired method with the boss or major spec mod, does 626,451 total damage, over a period of around 17.89 seconds, meaning DPS is 35,017, which is actually quite good. Outrageous Fortune, using the 4 and 3 method with a backup mag mod, does 573,191 over around 15.68 seconds, meaning DPS for that is actually 36,556. Like I said, less damage but higher DPS. Of course, that's because it's not relying on auto load and holster every time you fire from Izanagi's, so you get up to that 5th and final sniper round much faster. For the other 2 150 RPM grenade launchers, I'll bring them onto the graph now with a backup mag mod, but due to the very similar damage per round and all the timings being the same, the lines all sit on top of each other. Still, the DPS numbers are coming onto the screen, and there is a little bit of a difference between them all, but not much. So I'm going to bring the Wendigo and Izanagi's combo onto screen now, just to see how it compares to the 150 RPM grenade launchers. And okay, so they're not really a true replacement. The boss spec method actually does a little more damage but less DPS, while the backup mag mod method does both less damage and less DPS. Now, it's not that these are bad numbers, they're actually really good numbers. Anything above 30,000 DPS I consider good, but they're not a replacement for Wendigo, and sit below it for the entire test. Now, you may have noticed a bit of a pattern here, that being the time at which you fire from Izanagi's is almost exactly the same for Wendigo and all 3 150 RPM grenade launchers. So let me explain. When you fire 3 rounds from a 120 RPM grenade launcher, there's still an extremely short delay before you can fire from Izanagi's, due to the reload time limit, whereas when you fire 4 from a 150, there's no delay. And as it turns out, that means you can fire at almost exactly the same time from the sniper. And when you've just unloaded 3 grenades from the 150s, there's a delay for that, which also means you fire from Izanagi's at the same time again, because you need to wait for the delay to end, and it's the same as when using Wendigo. Another thing that might not make much sense, and if not, let me know in the comments and I'll try to explain it better. But basically, there's a minimum amount of time that you must wait out between each round from Izanagi's, and this is all about doing the most damage possible in that time, but without extending it. So we'll move on now and look at Interference 6, with spike grenades, obviously auto load and holster, full court and a backup mag mod. This follows exactly the same method as when using Wendigo. It's coming onto the screen now, and it's a very interesting result. So Wendigo's explosive light perk allows it to pull ahead by a large margin, as you can see here and here, and it maintains its lead for almost the entire test. But normal rounds from Wendigo don't do much damage compared to Interference 6, and so the gap then closes, as you can see here and here. Believe it or not, and you can't see it on the graph as it's so close, but Interference 6 does 624,831 damage compared to Wendigo's 625,533, meaning Interference DPS is 39,773. Both of those have been tested over 15.71 seconds. Now, as far as I'm concerned, those DPS figures may as well be the same. But does this make Interference 6 a true replacement for Wendigo? And personally, the answer is no. If you fire all 5 rounds from Izanagi's at ×4 honed edge buff, then Interference 6 does the job just as good as Wendigo. But if you only have 10 seconds to do damage, or even 14 seconds, Wendigo is still ahead. It's ahead for the entire time it's tested, so anything less than 5 rounds from Izanagi's and Wendigo is better. It's just at that last second for that final round from Interference 6 that it catches up. Now, something to remember with these tests, and that is the timing is based on my own attempt to sprint cancel. There'll be plenty of players out there who can do it better and faster, which will of course increase DPS, so take these numbers as a rough guide. Either way though, no, we have not found a true replacement for the Wendigo and Izanagi's Burden combo, but I'll be doing this again once Beyond Light has been released, so we'll see how any new grenade launchers do and also how any sandbox changes can affect this. Just need to find somewhere new to test, as poor Greg is leaving us soon. And on that sad note, it's all from me. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it informative. If you did, please consider subscribing and liking or disliking, and give me some feedback in the comments down below. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.